Christy, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So would you mind starting us off just by giving a bit of introduction to yourself and also what you've created in Denver?
Sure. So my name is Christy Wynne, and I am actually a certified This Naked Mind sober coach. I actually have a history or a medical license. So I used to practice integrative family medicine as a PA. And I've also studied Ayurveda, I've studied nutrition, and now I'm coaching mostly all women, some men on certain platforms. But I'm doing both sobriety coaching and also coaching around, what happens once you quit drinking. So that's what I'm doing now. My husband and we have also opened a sober bar. I don't love to use the word sober, but that's just kind of what people are familiar with, the terminology. So it's an alcohol-free full service bar and bottle shop. And we're also a coffee shop by day. But we opened that last May. We haven't even been open a year yet, and it's going really, really well. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, it's so exciting. I came across a wake, I remember online about a year ago, and I was so excited to see it because not only that it's alcohol free, and I'd never been to one, even as a sober person, but also that it's in Colorado. So I had the chance to go and I was home visiting family who lives close by. And I was just blown away by the variety, for one. Like, I didn't even know how many alcohol free beers and wines and spirits there are, but also the atmosphere that you've created there is just really incredible. So I was curious, before we talk more about Awake, what's been your own journey with sobriety and what's been the inspiration behind the bar?
Yeah, so it was sort of a long journey. I mean, I started drinking when I was 14, like many of us, like in high school or early high school. And I had a 32-year drinking career, minus pregnancy and all of that. But it was really a huge part of my identity. It always was a big part of my life, big part of, we love to travel. And it's just one of those things that it just was always sort of present. It was always there. And I didn't really understand how to do life without it. So I would say probably in my early 40s, my intuition started to really kind of like, because I wasn't handling alcohol as well anymore. I was feeling really, really sick after just like a couple of glasses of wine. And here I was practicing medicine, helping women balance hormones and working really hard, doing all the right nutrition and supplements and all the things. And then same thing with myself, because I was going through perimenopause at the time and, still kind of coming up against these walls where I was feeling foggy and yucky in the morning. Cognitive kind of issues. I was trying to be a mom and be present. But I was clearly preoccupied and wasn't really present. I was really immersed in that mommy wine culture in our neighborhood. I live in Colorado. Well, like I said, I live in Colorado, and we have a really big binge drinking problem here. And despite, how we try to be so healthy here. And so it really just sort of, my intuition just kind of started screaming at me. Like, I don't think we should be doing this anymore. But the problem is I literally had nobody around me who had quit, except if they had to. It was like the extreme, like they had to go to rehab or whatever. And or they were forced to quit for one reason or another. But I didn't know anyone else who had just decided to quit just because it wasn't serving them anymore. And so it was a process. I quit once for like 3 or 4 months, and then felt great. But then we moved abroad. We moved to Europe. And this is where the story gets really funny, because we were living in the south of France in Provence, with rosé vineyards in my backyard. I'm like, in rosé land. And but what happened there was really interesting. And that is that I was able to slow my life down, because it's a slow life there, and really take time for myself and be very contemplative, and just sort of kind of be like, okay, what do you want from life? Like, where are you not feeling well? What isn't serving you anymore? And alcohol was just the most obvious thing. It was just the thing that was there. And at the same time, I was researching and writing an article on women and alcohol, and for a magazine. So I was writing that. And so that's where I discovered This Naked Mind. And then I started to find all these women who were quitting just to quit. And I was like, wait, this is a thing. Like, I can actually quit and it's okay. So that's sort of, where it all kind of really solidified for me. And I was able to quit while living in the south of France, and haven't looked back. And that was over 3 years ago now. So it's been an interesting, journey, that's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And you make such a good point about that sort of like fast-paced life, and how that, do you think that that contributes to drinking, that people, haven't really adapted this slower way of being and are just kind of rushing through?
Yeah, I think for many of us, our coping skills are to make ourselves busier. So it's like this combination of like modern society and technology, also being a woman and trying to do all the things to like, prove ourselves. And, women, we're supposed to want it all, right? Have a great career, be a mom, be a good be a good partner, and all these things. There's just so much pressure. And I think a lot of us tend to move into, workaholism, or just busyness. Like, we pride ourselves, especially in Western culture, on being so busy and just doing, going all the time. And I think I was using alcohol to sort of numb through that. And also just sort of repress like my intuition and my knowing that was like, please, we don't want to be doing this anymore. But I didn't know any other way. I didn't have any other tools. And so France really allowed me to explore all that stuff, like start to meditate some more and start to read some more and just kind of get quiet and learn how to kind of feel those feelings again, and settle in, really. I mean, it's about the snow globe settling. And then it's like, oh crap, now what do we do, with ourselves? So yeah, I definitely think it contributes for sure. Our Western culture is really just so like, this badge of honor, who wins the busyness contest and who is working hardest. And, so yeah, definitely for sure.
Yeah, it's so true. I often feel like workaholism is the addiction that's celebrated and praised, but it's great. I think a lot of people are, that's in those moments of stillness, you can either go one way or the other. Some people find it
Yes.
really confronting and then decide to numb, but obviously you've chosen to fully embrace
Mhm.
what came up for you. So was that the moment that Awake was born, or was it when you were in Provence in France, the idea?
No. So while we were living there, we were starting to notice the product scene kind of like Heineken Zero was pretty big in Europe when we were there. It hadn't quite made it to the US yet. And so we were noticing that. And then we took a trip to London. And I remember walking into this beautiful store in Notting Hill. It was this boutique kind of marketplace. And they had this whole wall devoted to products. And that was when Seed Lip was just coming out. And so it was like these gorgeous bottles, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. There are things that we can try and drink. And sort of that moment sort of sparked my attention, or both my husband and I's attention. He quit drinking actually 1 month after me. So, but then it was when we moved home. So we moved back to the US, and then just a few months later, we were in lockdown. And so thankfully we knew how to do it. We were like, oh, I got this. Like, I have clarity. I know how to be still. I know how to like be with myself. And so that was all such a blessing for us, for sure. But it was during the early stages of the pandemic when my husband and I just started, our brains just started, swirling like, okay, because I remember driving around Denver and I went from liquor store to liquor store. I am not kidding when I say I spent 2 hours one day just looking for something, like some alternative. They didn't have anything except for like O'Doul's. I'm like, no, I don't want this. And so I remember talking to one of the wine shop owners and I was like, could you please like get in something like some, alcohol-free wines? And that was when they were just kind of starting and they weren't that great. And he had to specially order it for me. And it took like a week and a half to come in. And then on Amazon, you could order Heineken Zero, but it was like $3 or $4 a can. I mean, they were totally upcharging it. And so my husband and I were like, this is wrong. Like, this is, people are trying to not drink and it's so impossible to like find anything. And so that's sort of when our idea was like, oh, wow, we need to start, a bottle shop at least. Like we need to open something where people can get these things. And then the product scene just exploded. It just exploded really rapidly from there. So, and it's at the point now where we can't even keep up with it.
Oh, really? So there's so many
Mhm.
options to choose from. Because I was really blown away. I mean, I have never seen so much variety as walking into Awake. I didn't know that there
Mhm.
were that much, you know what I mean? Because you have a fully stocked bar. I love walking in and
Yeah.
seeing that and knowing that you can create that same atmosphere. So
Yeah.
were we kind of following Europe then in terms, just maybe a couple years behind in terms of getting all those options?
I think it all sort of happened at once. It happened in the US, then, it was happening everywhere. And now the product scene is just, I mean, on all, like we get a ton of stuff from Australia, New Zealand. We get quite a bit from Europe, different European countries, especially Scandinavian countries and the UK are two big ones. But otherwise, the US is really, I mean, so it's projected to be, a $3 trillion industry by like 2025. So it's one of the fastest growing industries right now is the alcohol-free product market. And just, I mean, it's all just like small distilleries, locally owned. And then of course, all the big guns are hopping on board like Budweiser and Coors and, all of them are doing alcohol-free beers, but the craft beer scene is huge now in the alcohol-free world. So I love it because I feel like a lot of these people, the brewers and, various people are really taking this challenge seriously of like, okay, this movement is not going anywhere. And so we need to hop on board and they're totally geeking out over it. And so it's like this big competition of like, who can make the best this and who can make the best that. And so you're really getting like these high quality products coming out that are just getting better and better.
Oh, I think that's so exciting because one of the biggest threats, I think, to sobriety becoming mainstream is the way that it would impact the revenue of the alcohol companies and so many other businesses like bars and restaurants that
Mhm.
profit from people consuming a ton of alcohol. So I think that to me seems like is this incredible solution that we've found. And so how has it been with creating Awake? I mean, I'd love to know like what the process has been like of you opening up the bar and how it's been received by the community.
Yeah. So it was definitely one of those things of like, if you build it, will they come kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we were, we had no idea. But of course, like, we're like, there has to be more people out there like us that really want to still have the ritual and the community and the safe space and just the fun of like a bar, but minus the alcohol. And I mean, it was incredible from the minute word got out that this was even happening. We had all the news the press contacting us, like, what is going on? What is this? What are you doing? And so, but everybody was really genuinely curious, and it was
You
great. We
describe
got
it like a UFO has landed in
I
Denver.
know,
It's
totally,
like, what's
totally.
happening?
Yes. It's kind of what it felt like at first. We felt like these like aliens like coming in. We have friends in the restaurant industry, and they were all like, "Oh, okay, well, I hope this works," kind of thing. And but I will say that we built it and they came and they came in droves. So the first weekend we were even open, we were just so jam packed. We had people just flooding in, like, and this is during the pandemics. I mean, like the, middle of it. And people were just coming in and just in tears. Like, I haven't been able to be in a bar in 8 years. And oh my gosh, I can't believe this is happening. Or, we had baby showers, like for pregnant women right away. We had prom kids come in, like high school students coming in. And these kids they have access to alcohol. Like, they can get it. It's very easy. And they were choosing this. And then we have a huge LGBTQ community that we do a ton with drag shows and various events. And it's just we just started doing singles night, which was a huge success. As
I
far
love
as,
that.
like tons of people showing up and everything. But it's just been spectacular. And, it just keeps getting more and more buzz, and people are just still finding us and still super excited. And we just rolled out our franchising program. So that's kind of taking off, and it's exciting. It's just exciting for the movement, that we know that this is not going anywhere. It's just going to continue to grow and get bigger.
Absolutely. When you're in the bar, what's the atmosphere like? Does it feel to you similar to if you were to be in, any other bar in Denver? How is it different?
Yeah, I mean, it feels definitely like a bar, and that's what we wanted it to feel like, but it feels like a really safe space. And it feels like there's just a mindfulness there that you don't get when there's alcohol involved. And in fact, we've had people walk in thinking we were a regular bar, and they clearly, but we're very close to where the Broncos play football. And so we get these people off the street who've already had several drinks, and they kind of come in, and they come up to the bar, and they're trying to find like brands they know. And they're like, and they clearly have been drinking a lot, and you can feel it. Like, the minute someone walks in that's intoxicated, the whole room just takes on a whole different vibe. So it's very interesting for sure. And it's something we've had to kind of figure out how to navigate and how to manage. But I just think it feels so special in there. I mean, we have live music all the time. We have DJs, we do dance parties. So it's you could still have all the fun and do all the things. We just don't have the alcohol piece.
Yeah. And you speak to a good point there. Like, it's actually good to feel the different energy, both in yourself and just experience it of what it's like to be fully present and in a space where people are, connected to their bodies. They're with you in that moment. They're not, kind of intoxicated, basically.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'd love to hear
Yeah.
about the dating event too. I think that's really interesting because I know for, myself getting sober, that was something that I just thought, at the time I was living in Chicago, and I really hope you open one of your bars in Chicago, because I just felt like, especially in those winter months and in the summer too, because it was around sporting events, and it really felt like drinking was the only option, or, I'd pour myself in my yoga studio. So dating was definitely something where I was just like, well, I guess I'll probably just be single, or, like, I just kind of had to like let that go, which is interesting because, it's not necessarily the healthiest way to start a relationship anyway,
Right.
being drunk all the time. So
Mhm.
I wonder, how has that been with the dating event, and yeah, like just creating that atmosphere?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, totally. So what we really encourage people, even if you are still drinking and like are going to continue to drink, we still think it's a really sweet spot to have a first date, because you remove that element of having the alcohol. And so that you really can be present and kind of get to know somebody on a different level, because the tendency is to either meet somebody out in a bar or meet somebody, like you meet someone and then your first date revolves around just drinking a ton. And often, as we all well know, that can lead to things that we regret later, and we're like, I didn't really, this person isn't really for me, but I just was like drowning it out. So we really encourage first dates, even if you're not like sober curious, or whatever terminology you want to use. Because it's a safe space. It's a sweet spot. So we're still exploring, more things to do around the dating. So that night we had was just like a singles night. We have had requests to do like speed dating and LGBTQ stuff, like dating. And so we're still, we just wanted to try it out one night, and we did recently, and it was amazing. So we're planning to definitely plan some more things around that for sure.
That's awesome. I love to hear that.
Yeah.
And you spoke to a good point earlier too about how this whole like mommy drinking wine
Mhm.
culture and some of the challenges with friendships too. How has your decision to get sober been received? And do you think that those challenges, do they still exist?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, like I said, I got sober in Europe while living there. And so I first had to navigate that scene, and it was a big, expat scene, and also we had tons of European friends over there. And at first I hid it. I pretended I was drinking. I was
Yeah.
like, I would carry around a glass of wine and just not drink it. Um, and it was just so funny. Now it's funny for me to look back on it now, because I was still like trying to get my legs, like I was very shaky, and didn't really know how to navigate being a sober person, or like a person who chose not to drink. And so I did that for a while. But then when I moved home, it was definitely interesting, because my friends knew that I had quit, but they hadn't been around me yet. And so coming home, it was I remember one day being in the grocery store, and a woman that I used to, be part of my mom wine nights, she completely avoided me in the grocery store. Like, she saw me, pretended she didn't see me, turned the cart around and went down the other aisle. I mean, it was really, I
Wow.
was like, oh, I see how this is going to go. Like,
Wow. And because
some
she already
people,
knew that you
yeah.
had decided not to drink.
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow.
And so it was, you have people in the whole spectrum. I mean, and one of my dearest best friends here ended up quitting a couple years ago. And I've also, you know taken breaks from certain friends, and now they're kind of circling back 3 years later, like they're re-entering my life again. And because now they're ready to kind of look at their drinking. And
Mm.
so it's interesting, you kind of have the whole gamut. But part of doing the work, and part of the next steps after you quit, and part of this, like, peeling back layers and getting to know ourselves again, is like, okay, I need to re-examine some friendships, and what is serving me and what isn't, what's healthy, what's not. Were these friendships revolved just around drinking? Other ones were definitely deeper. And so there was definitely a weeding out process. Some of it just happened organically, and it wasn't a big dramatic event. But there was definitely some sadness there. There was definitely some, like, am I missing out? But then I slowly moved into the joy of missing out.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be doing that anyway, so it's okay. But the most beautiful thing that happened, and if anybody out there is listening and is questioning, like, oh no, like, can I do, what's going to happen, is when you release all those things that are no longer serving you, the room and space and capacity you have to let other things into your life that are so much bigger and more beautiful is like, I would say the number one gift, because all the people I have met through being alcohol free is mind boggling. Just the ripple effects of it, as you probably know too, are just, it's the most spectacular. I feel like it's just magic how that happens.
Oh,
So,
I completely agree. And, as hard as it is to consider losing friendships, just that story you told about, the friend that avoided you in the grocery store, it just goes to show if your relationship is resting on a foundation of alcohol, and as soon as that slips away, it's like there can't even be a basic interaction, like a hello, then that's
mhm.
actually can be a blessing in disguise, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I say weed them out, weed them out.
Yeah, alcohol. Yeah, getting sober does a really good job of doing that for sure.
Yeah, it weeds out a lot of things. Yes, for sure.
Yeah. And I find it so interesting your background too in health and wellness. And it was interesting hearing you describe Denver as a place where it's so healthy, but also like really big into drinking. Because I went to school in Boulder and I remember I think of Colorado as like the healthiest, happiest place on earth. Like I remember I felt like when I got there, I was like, wow, everyone is like out so active, hiking, running, smiling. And I actually just thought at the same time I'm at school in Boulder, which is kind of notoriously a party school, and people
Mhm.
were getting out of their minds like all day, every day, myself included. It's probably why I loved being there so much at the time. But I actually just thought that was the campus that I was on. I didn't really realize that that was as present in Denver. And so is that something that you've noticed, that it's like you've kind of got both of these extremes?
Yeah, I mean, Colorado does have some of the highest binge drinking rates in the nation as well. So Pitkin County and Summit County, which are basically Aspen and Breckenridge, have the highest in the nation. Those
Wow.
two counties. Yeah. And, a lot of it's just this après scene, right? I mean, it's like we do all these big athletic events or these ski days or mountain bike days or whatever. And then it's like the reward at the end of the day. It's just part of like the culture.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think in general, we have a major problem where we have, and not just Colorado, I'm talking across the board, of where we have somehow intermixed alcohol and wellness.
Mm.
And I mean, I feel like it's really out of control because what it does is it keeps us all stuck
Mhm.
in these unhealthy patterns. I mean, we know now that alcohol, there is no safe amount of alcohol. We know it contributes to 7 different cancers. The World Heart Federation just came out and made their statement that no amount of alcohol is healthy for your heart. So really, I mean, we have nothing anymore. There, we have no ground to stand on as far as, oh, just a little bit's okay, or, moderation, and so we just know that there are no health benefits, yet we continue to mix it with wellness. It's like yoga and, wine and like mimosas and mammograms. I mean,
Yes, you were the first person to tell me about
yes,
that, and I was
yes,
horrified.
yes.
So that's literally drinking mimosas while you're getting a clinical breast exam to test for cancer.
And drink and alcohol is directly correlated or causative for breast cancer. Yes.
Yeah, and I think
So, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I really equate that almost, and it sounds crazy now, but it sounds to me like a doctor handing you a pack of cigarettes as you wait
Mhm,
for results from your test. And I think,
mhm,
you know, we shouldn't forget that in the 30s and through about the 50s, like cigarettes were branded as doctor approved.
mhm,
And so they were being recommended. And
mhm.
I think, yeah, I mean, do you, like, as someone who is in the wellness space yourself, I mean, what do you think is like, how can we sort of raise the standard? Because I'm personally always really triggered by like Vino Vinyasa and beer yoga. I mean, there's
Mhm,
so much that I find is wrong with bringing it into yoga, from like cultural appropriation to
mhm,
people seeking it out for, to heal trauma and all of that. I
mhm.
mean, how can we like, what can we do to combat that, do you think? Or is that already happening?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated because it's so deeply embedded now. I mean, it's a big systemic problem. And I mean, even our healthcare system, I mean, I could talk for hours about the healthcare system and, the pharmaceuticals and how there's this cycle of that happens where it's just ultimately sick care. It's not healthcare, um, but I definitely think, big alcohol knows what they're doing. Okay. They're marketing people. They hire neuroscientists. They hire people who understand how the brain works, who understand how to get people hooked on this stuff. And so I think it's just about having conversations. It's also about not going to those places. Like, I will not go to a yoga studio that is advertising alcohol. I'm not going to. And then, seeking out the places that are, not doing that. And just speaking up. I mean, it's incredible what that will do. Even just going into a bar or a restaurant or whatever, and asking why there's nothing good alcohol free on the menu. Just the more of us that just speak up about these things and just call it out for what it is. We don't have to be on some soapbox. We don't have to like start preaching to everybody, but just be like, oh, isn't that interesting? Like, this gym is promoting this, and with, Prosecco at the end, like, how does that go together? How does being healthy and wanting to nourish our bodies and, how does that fit with Prosecco? And so, but it's going to take a while to undo. I mean, for sure. I mean, it's big, but I do think even just the last 3 years, I feel like there is such a bigger trend of people seeing it for what it is, and recognizing, wait a minute, like, are we all that? Like, it's like we're all being dumbed down in a way. Like, oh, you're only going to come to the gym if we give you a beer. Or
Exactly.
it's like, okay, I think I could just come to the gym. Like, I don't need, and so
It's like we're children being
yeah,
like bribed with candy,
exactly. Yes, that's exactly it. So it's really is a dumbing down of our culture and our society. And it's like, um, let's just kind of keep everybody numbed out and, hiding in the corner, and we keep everybody right where we want them, kind of thing, So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just going to take time to undo, just as smoking. I mean, it took years and years, and we're finally to the point now where it's so, like, it's rare to see somebody actually still smoking. And when you do, you're like, oh, wow, look, like that person's smoking. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, they're
Like,
making a conscious choice about their health, and we all understand
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I think it's really about education. But alcohol is very precious. It's very precious in our society, and nobody wants it to be called out. Nobody
Mm.
wants it to be questioned. And I think, gyms and medical offices, just all the ways in which wellness is now integrated in with it, is a way to keep us stuck, because it makes us think, oh, well, it must not be a problem because look, everybody else, we're all just having this mimosa after our whatever. But look at that opioid crisis over there. Can you believe that? Right. So you kind of point your fingers all around to all the other quote unquote problems, which they are problems, of course, but, willfully ignoring the big elephant in the room right in front of us all, and not wanting to take a look at that. So,
Yeah.
it's very precious.
Definitely. And that deflecting too, I think is something that we even do when it comes to giving up alcohol. It's like, oh, I'm not that bad. Look at how bad that person is, or I'm nothing like her. I'm nothing like, and yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
why it's exciting to me too, that people are kind of moving more towards the benefits of sobriety and also considering like gray area drinking and that sort of in between place.
Yeah.
How has it been for you in those moments you mentioned where you do, like, I don't want to say necessarily call people out, but when you like bring attention to it and that, oh, that's interesting. Like why, if you do raise attention to the fact that there's alcohol being served in a gym, or, there's not an appropriate selection of non-alcoholic drinks. Have you had experiences where that's either been positively or negatively received?
Yeah, I mean, I don't make this like a daily practice of mine.
Yeah.
I really try to just kind of be the change. I mean, that's really the best thing we can do. But when I do have a platform here and there, like, I did do an Instagram post once about wellness and alcohol, and for the most part, like 97% of people were like, "Oh my gosh, thank you for saying something." But then of course, you always have the few that are just like, oh, so now you're trying to tell people what to do. And, you're just like, oh, no, I'm just, stating facts. Like, you get to decide what you're going to do, but these are just the facts. And that we know alcohol is a class 1 carcinogen. Like, most people don't know that. They just don't. Or maybe they've heard it, but they just don't want to like really think about it. And again, I don't walk around screaming alcohol's a carcinogen, alcohol's poison. I don't do any of that most of the time. It's just occasionally, if there is an opportunity to educate somebody, sometimes I take it, and then it always comes with, consequences. Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I find that so funny because in your position in particular, it's not only that you're sober and have an alcohol-free bar, but you actually have this very well-rounded health and wellness background. So if
Yeah.
anyone has the ability to speak out on it, it seems like it could be you.
Yeah. And it's just funny because, if we were to find out like apples were poison, right? And people were like, and all the medical people and everybody was like, oh my gosh, everybody needs to know apples are poisonous. People would be like, oh my God, thank you. Like, I'm never going to eat that apple again. Like, that sucks. I really enjoy apples, but I'm not going to eat one. Okay. They
Yeah.
wouldn't be like, you don't tell me what to do, what I can and can't eat. Right. I mean, that's just an example of how alcohol it's such a trigger. It is such a high alert, like, do not take that away from me. Do not, and, people love to say, oh, I can take it or leave it. It's not a big problem for me. But those are the people that have never tried to leave it.
Mm.
They've never attempted to examine it or take a look at it. And I think it's important that you brought up that spectrum and that gray area, because most people fall in that spectrum.
Mm.
And so it's dangerous when we start to label people like alcoholics or whatever it is, the labels we use, because there is no definition for alcoholic. We don't say
Mm.
cigaretteaholic for people who smoke. I mean, it's a made up word. And so if you're looking for a true definitive, like, what is a problem, it's a spectrum, and it's alcohol use disorder. And that's the medical, DSM definition. And so it's just dangerous to throw the word alcoholic around because we don't really know what that means. And it also keeps people stuck because they're like, well, I'm not an alcoholic, so I guess I'm fine. And
Mm.
it just keeps people doing the same behavior. So I think it is important to realize that most of us do fall somewhere in the spectrum, and we're not on the very end of the spectrum. And we're also not at the opposite end of the spectrum. We're somewhere in the middle, where we consume a certain number of alcoholic beverages per week, per day, whatever it looks like. And you get to decide whether or not that feels problematic in your life. And how you're feeling. And, there are a multitude of reasons for, making that choice to not drink. And I call it the early exit. We don't have to wait to hit a rock bottom. Like, it's like a lot of us are sitting around drinking like, well, I haven't gotten a DUI. I haven't, gotten a divorce. I haven't lost my job. Like, I guess I'm fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but you feel like crap every day. You're disconnected. So it is interesting how it does keep us stuck.
I love that you say the early exit, because that sounds like such an empowered choice
Mhm.
versus being forced to do something. I think that's you spoke to the importance of recognizing that there are like neuroscientists too. It's not only that alcohol is an addictive substance, but there are people who are masters of how the human brain works
Mhm.
at getting us hooked on these things. So to take an early exit and to say, I am not going to have part of that. Like, I am not going to just continuously consume alcohol and dull out from my life because I'm being marketed in this way or because that's what everyone around me is doing.
Right. Yeah. And I think most people don't understand like we're not taught neuroscience. We're not taught like how to calm our nervous systems. I mean, or cope with hard things. And so that's why, cell phones and I mean, there are so many things around us that are designed to get you addicted. And alcohol is one of the most highly addictive substances in the world. And we have brains that are just naturally wired to be addicted. Everybody
Mm.
does, not just a certain few, not just everybody's brains. Nobody is immune to this. And our brains were wired that way initially to keep us alive, right? Back in the primitive days. But evolutionarily, like it's moved very slowly. And so this higher level of thinking is weak compared to the lower brain, the original
Mm.
brain. It's weak. It cannot stand up to it. And it's willpower and it wears out. And so I think when people start to learn how fascinating the neuroscience piece is and like, how do we rewire that? And how do we get into those habit loops and, hack into those and figure out what we're doing and how we're not being mindful. And it can happen with everything, sugar, phones, jobs. I mean, we all have addictions, all of us. And alcohol, you throw in a highly, highly, highly addictive substance at its core, mixed with that part, that brain that we have. I mean, it's no surprise. It's no surprise. So it's fun to teach people that stuff because you can just see them like going, oh my gosh, I'm not flawed. This isn't
Mm.
like some sort of like character flaw or something to be ashamed of. It's that we have this substance that is pushed on us. We live in a alcohol soaked society. And then we have these brains that are wired to be addicted. And the combination of the two, it's a recipe for everything that's happening. And so this is the part I love so much, is just teaching people and being able to empower them with this knowledge and teaching them how dopamine works and how it all just kind of, yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, it really is, because then it's like once you're able to, it's like you start by focusing on alcohol, but then once you learn these things, you realize that you can, start to have more empowered choices in all areas of your life.
Mhm.
Like, I recently heard an interview with Johan Hari where he was speaking about how he just wrote a book, Stolen Focus, and it was about how, same thing with social media. It's like, no matter how much willpower we have, for every one of us, there could be 1,000, of the best like psychologists and neuroscientists trying to figure out ways to hack into us. So I think equipping like taking the time to, whether it's quitting alcohol and then all the other things that, the skills that we accumulate in that process are so beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah. I love all of his work for sure. But yeah, this is where most of the research is headed is, um, in the mindfulness based research and the fMRI studies and, neuroplasticity and all of that. And it is super fascinating. And also like this nervous system work and
Mm.
learning to embody ourselves again and get back into our bodies and feel things, because we're so used to living all in our heads. I like to say we're all just talking heads walking around from like the neck up. And we're like
Yeah.
completely disconnected from the rest of our body. And so we're in these constant battle states with our higher and lower brains, right? And there's
Yeah.
all this cognitive dissonance, and it can cause so much suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And then that perpetuates the cycle, because then you continue to numb out because you're like, I don't like how this feels, and I'm flawed, and I have so much shame, and so we just perpetuate the cycle. So Yeah, I think, the future is for sure in, how do we get back into our bodies? How do we calm our nervous systems? How do we manage our thoughts, and, learn to not kind of get so entrenched in them. So it's super fascinating for sure.
Yeah, it is. And I love that. The body carries such important information. And,
Mhm.
just the ability to be in tune with that is so powerful. And on the opposite end, to numb out and dull that is just so
Mhm.
disempowering. So,
Yes,
yeah,
100%. Yeah.
I completely agree. Well, so what's next in terms of Awake? Are you, I know you mentioned that the franchise is, you've
Mhm.
just announced the franchising program. And so how is that? What do you see the future for with?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we did roll out our franchising last week, and it's just been kind of a whirlwind, and we're just sort of, treading water at this point, just trying to, see what happens with that. But we have so much interest, and it just goes to show that this movement is just so huge. And also, we're seeing other places pop up and start to open and bottle shops. So that's super exciting. So yeah, as far as us, we're just sort of focusing on the franchising right now, and we'll go from there. But just
Will
kind
you
of,
bring in? Oh, sorry.
pardon?
And I was going to
No,
say, will
you're
you bring in the wellness component, and do you do your coaching there and everything? Do those two kind of come together in any way?
Yeah, so I have a ton of ideas for workshops and things that I want to do out of Awake, but it's, with the pandemic, it's just been kind of a challenge. So hopefully we'll be able to roll out more of that. I did just run like a dry January in-person group, which was awesome. It felt so good to have people in there and like in a group. Um,
And what was that
we
like?
it was great. It was so great. We had 15 people, which was perfect. And just, exploring and getting curious and teaching them all the things we were just talking about. It was super fun. Um, but it was awesome. So I have a lot more plans like that for things that I want to do in the future. Just workshops on, even just like nervous system regulation workshops, and, different tools and coping mechanisms, and various things. Um, so yes, so there will be a lot more programming rolling out now that hopefully, I mean, we can start to gather again, and, things are maybe moving a little bit toward normalcy again. I don't know.
Fingers crossed.
Whatever that new normal is, I guess. But yeah, it's exciting. So yeah, lots of things to come, lots of exciting things. We plan to do more, sober music festivals, and we did dance parties out in the
How was the
street
dance
last
party?
summer. They
Because
were
that's
so
something
fun.
I remember
Yeah.
doing an ecstatic dance when I was traveling in
Mhm.
Southeast Asia. And that was the first time when since I had been sober, that I felt like, because that used to be such a big part of my life when I would go out to bars and festivals and all of that, but I was always drinking. And so I kind of thought at one point that I was going to have to just make peace with that side of myself and just say, well, like I can't handle alcohol and drugs. And so that's
Yeah.
where these things happen. So I'd love to
Yeah.
hear, like, how was the dance party?
Oh, they were amazing. So amazing. I mean, I was in tears every single, we did 3 summer dance parties, and then we were the bar for an event called Sundown Festival in Denver, which was this music festival that was all alcohol free.
Oh, amazing.
And it was, I mean, it's just in those moments when you see people, like they'll do an opening and closing meditation, and just people just letting loose and just dancing and really feeling the music, because live music is a huge part of my life, and I've always been a big concert goer. So for me, that was really scary at first too. I was like, I will not give up my concerts. Like, just and what I've discovered is they're so much better. because
Yes.
I'm really there and I'm like feeling the music and I'm experiencing it. And then I can drive home and I wake up the next day and I remember the whole thing. And it's such a better experience for me. So yeah, it's just beautiful. It's beautiful to see people and to be able to just have all the kids around and just see them running and dancing and just being so free. And like, you don't have to worry about it turning into a big, S show, like
Yeah.
with the kids around and all of that. So I think it's just so special. It's really fun.
Yeah, definitely. And that's such a good point too, like really leading by example and
Mhm.
showing, because you mentioned there were kids who are, having their prom at a wake, and just for them to be exposed to that it's not necessarily because we're at a music festival or because we're at an event, our parents are going to be drinking.
Right. Yeah, just sort of showing them and teaching them that, look, I can do all these things in life and I don't need alcohol to do it. Um, I remember an après ski thing. We were in Europe and we were in the Alps, and it was one of those famous, I can't remember the name of it, really famous after ski clubs
Mm.
on the mountain. It's just very like, as you would imagine, Swiss, European, and super fancy. Everybody had their fur coats, and
Mhm.
we walked in there, and this is when my husband and I didn't drink anymore. And the music was so amazing. It was total house music, like DJ, like just pumping. Everybody was spraying champagne everywhere. And I just looked around and I just had this energy come into me. And I got up on top of the table because everybody was like on the tables dancing in my ski boots, dancing like crazy. And my kids were like staring at me like, what is mom doing? But those are the moments for me that are just, I'm so proud of now, because I'm showing my kids like, look, we can do all this stuff and I don't need to have the drink in my hand. I don't need to have, the alcohol in my system to do this and have a lot of fun. Of course they were like horrified that I was doing that, but I like to
No, it's
think that I was,
great.
I was definitely embedding something into them. Right. So, so
I
yeah, it was
love
fun.
that. I love
Yeah.
that so much. So if there is anyone listening who's kind of on the fence and is kind of maybe in that gray area, what would be your like best advice for someone of how they can just approach sobriety and make it sustainable?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things when you're starting off and you're beginning is just to really allow for a lot of curiosity,
Mm.
because there is going to be a lot that you are conditioned around that will you won't even realize how much you're conditioned until you start to get curious, and then you're gonna, you have to be willing to be proven wrong, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh wait, I don't need this drink to do this, or this is actually that lies. Like I didn't need that. And so I think at first it can be really jarring because you are learning all these things. And a lot of us don't want to be wrong. We're just like, but this is just the way it always was. And a lot of that's going to get turned upside down at the beginning. And I think it's just so much about compassion for yourself, understanding you're not flawed, understanding that you have done the best you can with what you knew and the tools that you've had, and that now you're here to learn a new way. And it's going to take time to undo. It's not something that happens overnight. Um, and just maybe trying to seek out a community of people that can help you navigate, I would say. And there's so many beautiful communities out there, that are doing this. So that would be my advice.
Oh, thank you. I love that. And you really do such an amazing job of leading by example. And I just have to acknowledge, like, I feel so lucky that I got to experience Awake firsthand. And I'm so excited to know that more spaces like that are going to be opening up, because you really just have created, like you said, a safe space that just allows people to experience more of life, to be more
Mhm.
present, to access more depth in relationships with other people. So yeah, it's been really, really nice hearing from you, hearing your story and everything you offer. And if anybody wants to connect with you after, or, find more about your work, where would be the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah. So my my website is Dance Yourself Clean Coaching. And then also the zeroprooflife.com is another coach group that a community that I am involved with. So either one of those, you can find me.
Okay, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Christy. I look forward to being back in Colorado, hopefully soon,
Yeah,
and coming back to Awake.
I would love to meet you in real life. So thank you
Yeah.
for this. And this was super fun. So thanks for having me.